Janice Hisle, welcome to the Beer and Business Podcast.
Well, thanks. I'm excited to be with you guys for some strange reason.
Well, she's got jokes and she starts early. Wow. Good for you.
Obviously, she heard that I was in the studio today.
Yeah, I know. Well, Janice Hisle is a former recovering journalist and an author. Really excited to talk to you today about fake news. But before we get into that, guys, we are drinking some delicious beers from the official beer of the Beer and Business Podcast, Lion Creek Brewing, Mr. Winnie, Peachtree, Georgia. We are drinking, what is this, Darren?
This is Cloud to Ground IPA. It's a 6.5%er.
It's fantastic.
It is.
Easy
actually.
drinking.
I know.
Totally. What would you call this, like a West Coast style?
Kind of, sort of, maybe-ish, John. I don't know.
It's not like the
really?
hazy New England style. I think it's more of, it reminds me of kind of like a West Coast style pale.
Right. It's got some stuff floating in there.
A little bit of fruit to it, yeah.
Don't know what that float is, but it tastes good.
It's debris, and it's delicious.
And then the second one we're going to have after this, we'll just get it out of the way right now. That way we can just go straight through the whole episode. Renegade.
Ooh.
That black Pilsner that they make.
Oh, yeah.
Or black lager, excuse me. It's a black lager. It's yummy.
I am a renegade.
So
you are a renegade.
Yeah, I'm a renegade without a clue.
Number one recognized college mascot in America. Renegade.
And Renegade is a great song too, right?
It is, yes. So, folks, please support the brewery. If you are in the Atlanta area, you need to come down and hang out. It's a beautiful brewery, great bar, cool vibe. They've got food trucks, events. You can go to the Brewery Hours app, check out what's going on. But you need to come to the brewery. And if you can't make it because you don't have a car and you can't download the Uber app because your phone is old, whatever, then at least go to the store and get some beer.
Yeah, most local convenience stores.
Yeah.
And, grocery stores.
They're all the way down. I just heard that they are actually in one of the big chain grocery stores all the way. I mean, they are locally, but all the way down in LaGrange now. So if you're in LaGrange, you can find it in the regular supermarket.
And if it's not in the store that you frequently go to, just burn it to the ground. Because that's what we do nowadays.
Pretend.
We're not happy with something, we just burn it to the ground, right?
You can pretend.
That's right.
Oh, don't do that. I'm sorry. That's bad. That's bad. Sorry, guys. Don't
burn
package stores down.
Do they really, really, truly burn things to the ground? Or is that just fake news?
Well, ask the people that live in Portland, New York City, Chicago. Could we just keep going?
Yeah, just keep on.
Yeah.
It's real.
So, Janice, you are what I would call a recovering journalist.
Yes, I actually use that term to describe myself.
So what is it that got you into journalism in the first place?
Well, I think that a lot of people who go into journalism are kind of maybe idealistic, especially at first. You think that you're going to maybe improve the world a little bit by the work that you do. On a good day, I always used to tell people, wow, I go out, talk to people, learn new things, and tell other people about it and get paid for it. What a cool job. And I always loved reading, writing, and talking to people from the time I was really, really a young kid. And so it just seemed like the right direction for me. And I was a little on the naive side, maybe thinking that, my little part of it was going to make the world better. And there were some times, throughout my career when I would actually see evidence that something I wrote mattered. And that feeling is incredible. Knowing that you literally did make some kind of a difference and you could actually see it.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. And that's exactly why I would expect to hear somebody want to go into journalism.
Well, yeah. I mean, you show up at the local store and with this coupon and you get half off, right? And that makes a difference.
Jesus, Darren.
It's not, she didn't write ad copy. She was a real journalist.
I have to podcast with this idiot, Janice.
Oh my goodness.
Janice, when you were young, did you watch the movie All the President's Men and then you're like, see, they made a difference, so I can too?
Yes, actually I did. I did watch that movie and I never ended up covering the national politics, but sometimes I did cover local politics. And my main thing that I covered was crime. But then there's oftentimes political intersections with crime, different laws that are passed that relate to crime. And so I dabbled in a bunch of different areas of journalism. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wait, you said you reported on crime. Was that your forte?
That was kind of what I gravitated toward mostly. It's kind of an interesting aspect of me that I am a really pretty much a wuss at heart. I'm a tender-hearted person, but yet I was drawn to these gory, horrible cases.
Gosh,
so my heart and my head were always in conflict with each other.
My wife keeps watching that
It made me a good reporter because I was able to relate to families of, say, murder victims. But I also would interview the families of the people who were accused, or even the accused people, if they, on a rare occasion, would grant interviews. So you have to be able to be almost kind of empathetic, I think, to all of those different types of people. And a concern that I have now is I feel like those, especially at the national level, that the reporters don't seem to go for all of the different stakeholders in the story the way they used to. That's what I perceive.
Well, I think now, especially at the national level, you can pretty much just combine the crime and politics sections as one. Because it's really the same thing.
Well, it's either that, I mean, or they were, even though you're saying that they don't seem to cover it, do you think they're being reined in and not allowed to cover the other aspect? It's like, just go out, do this one thing. That's all we need you to do.
Well, you know what? Actually, I've thought about this quite a lot, and I've done presentations about the topic of fake news. And I think there are several factors at play here. I think that sometimes there is an agenda from the news executives or the news organization. But I also think sometimes that the reporters themselves have an extreme bias one way or the other. And with the fast breaking 24/7 on and on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube environment that they're in, there's no time to really do any introspection and ask themselves, hey, do I really have a bias about this? Do I need to really work harder to get this other side that I'm not thinking of? Am I framing my questions in a way that is biased and already assumes or presupposes things that I should not? I don't think that introspection happens much anymore. That's the problem, part of the problem.
Well, I think one of the great things to do in this conversation is to kind of start with the punchline and then work ourselves backwards. Because, and let me explain that. I think that we're at a place today where not only is the news that we're getting biased, but in many cases, it's flat out lies. And I talk to so many people that are like, well, no, the news couldn't lie that much, could they? But it's like you can see a story and have, one network tell you one side of it and then another network tell you the other side of it as though they're both fact. Well, somebody's got to be lying. Everything, all angles can't be true. And so we've gotten to this place where I feel like, well, it's not that I feel like, I know because I see the evidence that these news media organizations have become echo chambers. They are narratives looking for facts and information to support what they think the conclusion already is. But
Absolutely. I agree with that. I want to give a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm speaking here mostly about the national level when we're talking about like national level politics.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, but the reason why I said I wanted to start with the punchline and go backwards is because Mr. Winnie and Darren and I were students of history. We love this country. I think we all would consider ourselves kind of constitutionalists, and always seeking the truth. And
a good constitution. It's fine.
You like it? It's a good document.
I would put myself in that same category. I love this country. I've always been about finding the truth as best I can is what I've always told people when I was in journalism. Yes.
So the reason why I wanted to go backwards is because I started my interest in politics when I was a teenager, which I was really quite nerdy. And for whatever reason, I realized that I was interested in politics. I know Mr. Winnie also took an interest in politics early on. Darren, you were probably doing too many drugs back then to remember any of that
Sports
stuff.
and girls. That was more important. Sports and girls. You could deal with politics. You didn't find girls attractive back then, huh?
But for the longest time, you know, the news in the U.S. was it was biased. It was slanted towards the left.
No.
But what's happened in the past, I'd call it 15 years, is this move from having a bias to almost even, I don't even know that this word is strong enough, but being an appendage of a political party. And it is shocking how fast it's happened, and then also how much social media has gotten intertwined into this this whole notion of who's the arbiter of truth. Because I think ultimately the problem today is you take a big topic and it's like, well, what's the truth? You know, COVID-19, where's the truth? I have a hard time figuring out what the hell to believe. You know, we just have this event that happened, you know, last week at the Capitol, and what's the truth? You know, because you hear different versions and you hear flat out lies. And I think so many people are they don't want to believe that they would be lied to like that, but we are.
Well, you know, I want to interject here that sometimes part of the problem, in fact, often anymore, part of the problem is the omission, the complete blacking out of information that is relevant to a situation. You know, look how many people have been banned from Twitter, not just the president of the United States, which in and of itself, if you look at it, you think, wow, if that can happen to the leader of the free world, I don't care if you love Donald Trump or hate Donald Trump. I've always been the kind of person who I might think so-and-so is a complete ass, but I will defend that person's right to be an ass publicly all day long.
Oh, thank goodness. I need you around me more often.
And so that's
I will support that person's right to be Darren Flanagan all day long.
Well, and that's my concern is that there's an old kind of story, like a little analogy that say that you have an elephant, and at the front of the elephant, one person's standing and that person describes what he or she is seeing, can't talk, but the person at the back end of the elephant sees something very different. And both of them are being accurate, but neither of them is telling the whole story.
Yes, that's a very good way to put it.
That's really good.
So let's go back. I don't know if it was 15 years ago or when we started to see this rapid shift, but things started to change. So what was it in the news industry, I'll call it, Janice, that really started to push us towards this slide to fake news? Well,
if it's all right, I would like to kind of go back into my history as a journalist and give you an illustration.
Yes, we'd love that.
Of what I perceive has happened. So I was fresh out of journalism school. It was the mid-1980s. And at that time, there were abortion protests across the country. It was a very, very hot button issue, way more than it is right now. And at that time, I was working for the paper in Youngstown, Ohio. Now, there had been a pretty major abortion protest that made national headlines because there was an arrest of a very high-ranking, I believe, I'm not 100% sure on this, but because I don't want to be fake. I want to be real. I believe it was an archbishop who was arrested while being part of this crazy setup where a bunch of people had chained themselves through this elaborate, setup with chains underneath a car and seatbelts wound together in a pipe so that they couldn't remove them from the doorway of an abortion clinic in Youngstown. I mean, it's just insane. So, yeah, pretty crazy stuff. So here I am. I'm a cub reporter, and we found out that a number of these protesters had actually come from a university that was maybe an hour and a half drive away from Youngstown, maybe a little more, further than that, in Steubenville, Ohio, and University of Steubenville.
Yeah.
And I was assigned to do kind of more of like a project. A lot of times when there's a major event in the news, they will have a reporter then kind of take a look at the whole ball of wax, not just the breaking news, hey, people were arrested for this protest, but then, dissect the whole here's the pro-abortion side, here's the anti-abortion side. Here's how all this boiled together, culminated in this big event. So here I am, a young reporter, and an editor comes to me and says, "Hey, Janice, we'd like to send you out of town and go to Steubenville and do a big project on this." And I was super excited. This was going to be one of my biggest, first assignments. But then I had been aware, because it was pounded in my head in journalism school, about bias and about being aware of one's own bias. And I realized that I had very powerful feelings a certain way about this topic. So I confessed that to my editor. And he's like, Janice, I really appreciate you being honest in telling me this, but look around this room. Do you really think there's not a single person in here who wouldn't have a strong feeling? We all have strong feelings about this. So it's your duty. And I don't want to hear what your viewpoint is, Janice. I trust me to be your backstop, that if I see that what you're putting together is slanted one way or the other, I will help you fix that. I will remedy that for you. Just do your job to the best of your ability. And you do realize that because the people on both sides of this spectrum that are willing to go chain themselves to a car, and then at the other end of the spectrum that have pictures of bloody babies that are against abortion, you realize both sides are nuts. So everyone you talk to is going to be nuts. Just recognize that. And to me, what my editor was telling me was about extremism. And I think that fringes of both sides are kind of a little off, right? I hate to say it, not just this topic, but many, many topics in our society. And so the kicker of this whole situation was I did my darndest to really be fair to both sides, setting aside my own very strong feelings. And I actually came up with a method that I used for many years after that, where I printed out my project and I used highlighter to color in one side of the story and then the opposing view in a different color. And I aimed for a visual. This was kind of a way to kind of objectively measure how much content was for each side. And that was a technique that served me very well for many years. And I really feel like that right now, one of the biggest problems is that journalists don't have the time or maybe even the self-awareness to do that type of introspection where they go, I feel this way.
Or they're not aware of the fact that there's more than one color highlighter.
There you go.
Yeah, there's pink too. It's not just yellow.
Yeah, but it doesn't taste as good. It's a different flavor.
Oh, that's a good point.
Well, it's a cultural thing, really, that's come about over many years, right? I mean, maybe there aren't any of those editors.
Well,
that Janice has that kept her in check.
What, good ones?
Exactly. And then
intellectually honest.
The other kicker of this whole thing was after I poured my heart and soul into making this story as fair and as balanced as I could make it, guess what? Both sides were pissed off at me.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's what's missing. I did a great job then. That's what's missing in journalism, because the truth isn't easy. And I'm actually glad that we're starting with this, because I have talked about this before. I don't know that I've talked about it on the show, but I think abortion is the perfect issue to illustrate this point. And that is the social construct is you're pro-abortion or you're pro-choice. Or right. Wait a minute. No, I screwed that up.
No, you did. Nice one.
Yeah, see, I can't even say it right.
You're pro-choice or pro-life.
You're pro-choice or pro-life, yes.
Yeah. Both of them get to use the word pro.
Guys, this is how good Line Creek beer is. I can't even get a simple issue right. I know, it's ridiculous, but it was a really good one. Okay, so you're either pro-life or you're pro-choice, right? And it is a very divisive topic. But I think that we can make a lot of headway on this particular topic if the dialogue in the public was honest. And here's what I mean by that. If you are pro-choice, if you are very honest with yourself and others, you would probably not support late-term abortion, especially if it's just, I don't want the baby anymore. It's 9 months, but because it's on the other side of a piece of skin, go ahead and terminate it. most people that are pro-choice would not be okay with that, especially if they sat in the room and watched the procedure. Mm-hmm. They would never be okay with it. On the flip side, you take somebody that's ardently pro-life and you said, hey, listen, can't we just find a way that before that baby has a heartbeat, if there are certain circumstances that somebody can terminate, like there's somewhere in the middle where we could meet and make progress on both sides. But that's not the dialogue that happens nationally. The dialogue nationally is you're one or the other, and the other side is evil and bad for all these reasons, and you should never talk to them. Mm-hmm. And that's just, right. You start from the premise of a lie, and you're never going to get anywhere.
But we can take this concept that you just raised and apply it to so many things, whether it's coronavirus, exactly. Donald Trump, what happened at the Capitol. And it seems like people get entrenched in a viewpoint. They have that viewpoint reinforced by going to a very right wing or very left wing media outlet because that's what they believe in. Mm-hmm. And it's like that elephant analogy. They're not seeing the whole picture. And here I am trying to describe the whole elephant.
Well, let's go back and talk about the change in journalism and the business model, because I thought your story was a great one. And I wish that level of morality and ethics existed in journalism today that you described for yourself and for your editor.
But it's not the case. Most journalists could spell either of those words today.
I can't either because I have spell check on my phone.
There's a few. There's a few out there.
There's a few
smart ones.
But back, you were saying that was from the 80s. So in the 80s, the news business was very different. There wasn't 24/7 cable news. There wasn't there wasn't internet. There wasn't social media. And so this business model evolved. And first it went to online, and then it went to, kind of clickbaity stuff. And then, it's evolved. Cable news, 24-hour cable news, multiple cable news networks. And how has that evolution changed the way that a news organization exists from a business perspective?
Well, I completely agree with you that the model has changed, but I wanted to throw in a couple points that dovetail with what you just raised. A lot of people don't realize that. I think you're talking a lot about the changes in technology that have forged a lot of changes in journalism, but I like to say this actually changes in economics. And what I mean by that is news organizations really made some stupid mistakes when widespread use of the internet started to take hold in the mid-90s. And I really feel this kind of set off a chain reaction for almost like a death spiral for traditional newspaper journalism. I remember being in a meeting at a newspaper where I was working for, and somebody raised their hand. We were just starting to put some of our stories online, and not everybody had a home computer yet with internet access. If they did, it might be dial-up. I mean, it was pretty primitive. I still remember that. And this person, I don't remember who it was, but one of my colleagues raised his or her hand and said, hey, but why are we putting these stories out there for free? And I don't remember the response other than the question was kind of blown off by, the bigwig who was conducting the meeting. And now in hindsight, I look back and I realize how important that question was, because once you give away content for free, people don't want to pay for it. Think about your own behavior. When you go to a website, if you hit that paywall, how often do you really go beyond it? You just don't.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. So I remember we talked several months ago about the documentary, The Social Dilemma, that was on Netflix.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
And that was a great documentary. And if you have not watched it, you need to watch that documentary. It'll blow your mind. But the one statement that I found so incredibly profound from that documentary was, if you are not paying for the product, you are the product.
That is the biggest message of that documentary. I agree completely.
And I think you're right. I think very early when the shift to the internet happened, a lot of media companies, what I'd call traditional media companies, did not understand. Because I'll be honest with you, and I don't fault people for this, But I do fault them for not making the pivot. I remember the first time I saw a camera on a phone. It was a Motorola 720, I think it was. I even remember the model number. It was this flip phone, and it took these pictures that if you squinted really hard, you might be able to figure out what it was like. Looking at an old Nintendo character. Yeah. It's like I think that's somebody I know, but I'm not exactly sure.
A half megapixel.
I know, it was so bad.
Awesome.
And I remember seeing this picture on this phone, and I said to people and mind you, I worked at AT&T, which makes this even better. But I remember telling people, oh my God, the general public is never going to take pictures from their phone. This is so stupid. Yeah. Man, did I get that one right, didn't I?
Yeah.
But so I completely understand people kind of dismissing it. But once it started to become more prolific, I think that the news in traditional media outlets failed to be responsive and failed to pivot and figure out different ways. How many of them just ran themselves into the ground? Papers just ran themselves all the way into the ground without making changes.
Well, when I was mentioning what I call these changes setting off a death spiral, what I mean by that is this. So you post your content for free. Fewer people are willing to pay for it, and or you're tipping off your competition, so then people can get the same stuff from another source very easily. Then, as a result, fewer people willing to pay, maybe they're quitting their subscriptions. You have lower revenue. That leads to you cutting your staff. I survived 5 rounds of layoffs at my last paper before I finally left because I saw the layoff train headed my direction and I wasn't about to remain lying on the tracks, allow the train to hit me. So you cut your staff. Then guess what happens? The quality deteriorates. Then a few more subscribers are canceling. Then there's even lower revenue and more layoffs. And so it goes. And intertwined with all of this is a major event that a lot of people don't realize when you come to think about print journalism, and that is Craigslist. Think about when you were a little kid. Do you remember you would have this Sunday paper and there would be page after page of classified ads?
Oh, yeah.
Those are dollar signs, my friends. Yep. And when Craigslist came along, it was like 1,000 voices screeched out in the universe and then were silenced, basically, like the old Star Wars thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that revenue was gone forever. And more layoffs. So then advertisers stopped paying for the printed supplements, more layoffs. It was just, again, a death spiral. And it was heartbreaking to me to see these things happening where there was a whole group of people that their whole job was to edit the copy and check facts. The copy desk, they called it. Shortly before I left my last newspaper job, the copy desk was eliminated. Eliminated. Gone. Right. So the fact checking that was happening internally and backstopping for, where's the rest of this story and spelling people's names incorrectly and, basic stuff. Yeah. So, and then experienced reporters and mentors were also gone. Just gone. So you end up with a lot of young people who didn't have anybody like I had, like you were mentioning, hey, how many, really good editors. I mean, I had great editors that guided me when I first started in the business that, older reporters who were, dyed in the wool and I was learning from them. And so we don't have as many experienced reporters to kind of show the young pups the ropes. The quality work goes down. The ability to spend time on long-term investigative projects is gone. Your ability to, again, critically think and evaluate is gone under this pressure to be first, get it out there. And you're understaffed, by the way. So, and then there becomes this whole desperation to get readers' attention and the clickbait and the sensationalism. So you see, it's all this big ball of wax. Death spiral is the best way I can describe it.
Well, and I think the other thing too is that, that death spiral and the fact that things were changing. I think one of the biggest issues for media in general is that there wasn't enough innovation. There wasn't the recognition that the sand is shifting underneath your feet. You know, because I remember there was that time when the internet started to proliferate, and there was this debate, you know, oh, newspaper's going to last forever. People want something to hold in their hands. And then there's other like, no, they're going to get their news on a screen. And there was really divisive, you know, thoughts on both sides, but that was the time for, you know, innovation and thinking outside the box. You know, Craigslist wouldn't have existed if a media company would have thought of Craigslist. You know, there could have been consolidation on a national level with all these fragmented local newspapers, and it didn't happen. I remember, I just made the comment about wireless. I remember when the iPhone came out, and I will never forget this. I had a guy, he was a senior executive at BlackBerry. Remember BlackBerry?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
You got to think back, because the kids these days don't even know what the hell it is. I loved this guy. He was a great guy. And he's sitting there telling me, he's like, man, nobody's ever going to use a screen as a keyboard. That's our secret sauce.
Yeah.
Like, the thing's never going to take off. And I'm like, bro, I have used it and it's freaking amazing. Right. Like, it's not like the old Microsoft, you know, tries at doing a smartphone. Like the keyboard on an iPhone this is the future, dude. This is amazing. No, people are never, ever going to abandon the physical keyboard on a smartphone.
So I had
we're here to stay.
Phone.
Yeah, right.
And a little slider.
Well, it's like we were beating them over the head with, dude, it's so good, but they couldn't see it. They couldn't get out of their own world.
Right. Well, who could? I mean, when this first started, newspapers started to go down. It's like, who knew about the revenue model? Like, you know, hey, we can post this news article on the internet for free. Yeah. But if we get 5,000 clicks, we can sell ads on both sides of the screen for this much. You know?
How many times have you been reading a news article from the paper online and you get like 3 paragraphs into it and they're like,
it pops up.
Oh, you want to read the rest? Please subscribe. And I'm like, no, I'll just go to a different source and it'll be similar.
I know. I hate that.
But that's why I only read The Onion, because everything they write on there is true. Such great journalism.
So
that's the funniest stuff.
I'm not trying to beat up on the media or journalism industry, but I think my point, Janice, is that there wasn't the innovation, there wasn't the forward thinking to know what was coming and to adapt before it decimated business models.
I absolutely agree with you, because, like I said, in looking back, how important that question was at the meeting when that person said, why are we doing this for free? And the question was blown off. And I'm quite certain that similar conversations were happening across the country at that point.
Yeah.
They were too close to the keyboard. Nobody's going to use a screen.
Well, I mean, I understand where she's getting at. The whole point is, as you said, when you were going through it when you were younger, and I think you used the word a cub. You were a cub
reporter.
Cub reporter. That you had your editors, you had your copy desk, you had everything else, and you had experienced journalists who were basically helping you, teaching you the ropes and everything. And now those people are no longer there, and they're harder to find. So the young people who are coming into journalism don't have that type of wisdom and experience to learn from anymore. And part of it is because it's happening too fast.
And at the same time, every newspaper, every media organization is pretty much understaffed. For example, by the time I decided I absolutely had to get out of the news business, you know, I was literally covering 9 counties by myself. Now, how can you do any kind of in-depth reporting when you're responsible for 9 counties and listening to a bank of like 12 scanners and hoping to God that you figure out whether this report over here of a fire is actually overblown, or whether you should run to that fire, or whether this triple shooting over here is just 3 people stubbing their toes. I mean, it was, and then, you know, I would do a quick Janice, do a quick web update with what you're hearing from the scanner. We used to never report anything just based on the scanner, because without verifying it, because it was so rarely accurate.
Sure.
And, we just started saying, well, according to the police scanner, and this story will be updated when more information is available. Well, guess what? No information ever became available because I was on to the next 3 things that came across the scanner. So my job satisfaction was in the toilet because I was always known for being pretty thorough, like really I had an innate curiosity that really drove me. And I think that a lot of journalists do, but I was probably worse than most in that way. I just couldn't stop asking the questions, and I would tend to write long, and my editors would always say, God, Janice, what are you trying to do? Write a book? And now I joke and say, well, apparently I was, because now I have written 2 books. So, but how do you do any kind of quality journalism under that kind of pressure and instant news pressure? I mean, so I wanted to throw that in there as a major reason. And another thing, I have to blame consumers a little bit, that they are so inundated with information that they don't think critically about what they're hearing or seeing. And I feel like they have lost the ability to discern between opinion and fact. And reporters are doing the same thing too. And at the meantime, you have all these other like interest groups, special interest groups, and politicians that are putting spin. And you got these busy reporters who just put out what they are led to believe, maybe. You got pranksters who put out fake news on purpose, like just regular Joe Schmo. What if I send out this fake thing and get everybody to click on it? Well,
Janice,
then go ahead.
That brings me to something that I want to ask you about.
Yeah.
That kind of fast forwarding to present day. One of the things that I've seen over and over again is that you'll have some outlet run a story where a quote unquote unnamed source says some things and they run that story. And then it's like every other outlet copies and pastes the story. And I just ask myself, I didn't go to school for journalism, so I have no idea what people are taught, but I got to tell you that from an outsider looking in, that seems like there are zero journalistic ethics that take place when you're just copy and pasting stories with unnamed sources and unverified things as though it's fact.
Right.
Well, let me tell you what the guidance used to be. So when I was in the news business regularly, we were always told that we should never quote other media unless you have no other way to get this point across. And if you do, you have to recognize that if what they're reporting is false and possibly libelous, that you are putting your newspaper on the hook for that. And so we would always say, according to such and such, like this TV station was reporting this, but we were unable to reach this person. So that's the only way we would ever do it. And I found it quite interesting that just yesterday it came across that the New York Post is now going to be barred by the management of the paper from using the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN. There were several other ones. They're not allowed to use those as primary sources anymore. I had to laugh and go,
that's all.
They should never have been allowed.
Use them as their primary sources.
Wow.
They should never have been allowed.
And then I ask myself, why is that news? Because it's so stupid to begin with.
Because it's actual ethics.
I know. That's the point, Mr. Reddy.
I just thought that was crazy.
It is. It's totally crazy.
Why don't you just go, Wikipedia? Go get all your facts from a Wikipedia.
Yeah, sure.
There you go.
Nice. So, Janice, in present day, I am literally shocked. And one of the biggest examples that has just got me really, really concerned about where we're going is what has happened since the COVID outbreak.
Oh, God.
Yeah, oh, God is right.
You think she's going to hang up on us?
I mean, it is insane to me. First of all, everybody should have questioned what was going on in the beginning when the media just was absolutely hyperventilating. Every second of every day was COVID, and it's like you'd see what was going on the news, and then you'd look out the front door and go, this doesn't seem to make sense. but I was really skeptical from the very beginning of the handling. And I think most people now that we've gotten to this point are really frustrated because they don't know. They don't know where the truth is. And I think this is a great example of how insane this has gotten, how far off the rails we have come with media in trying to figure out where do you find the truth? Who is the arbiter of truth?
You know, it's absolutely exhausting because the media reporters aren't doing the job that we used to rely upon them to do, to seek out the truth and to find not just side A and side B, but also side C, side D, all the sides of the story. We as news consumers now, if we care about a topic and you really care about finding out the truth for yourself, you have to spend all this time digging and going for perhaps a news outlet that you know leans right. But then at the same time, you might want to see what the other outlet that really leans left is doing. And maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. And the sad part is that I have seen reports that, for example, the efficacy of masks. This is a huge issue. Think about how many times on your own social media, people are like, just wear a damn mask. And they act like it's not harmful, but maybe it is. We don't, the studies that are coming out that show something that doesn't fit the just wear a mask mandate are being suppressed, even when there's peer-reviewed studies. And that's not right. Those studies, if they are done properly, need to be out in the public conversation, not just shoved aside because it doesn't fit what Dr. Fauci is saying right now.
Right.
And, Dr. Fauci started off saying, if you remember, there's no need for the public to wear masks. And that changed to, you got to wear a mask. And I don't think people would have started to feel so distrustful of what we're being told if there had been more of a disclaimer like, this is so new, we really don't know. And there was some of that, but to me, it wasn't emphasized enough that we're not sure whether this would help, but perhaps. Or, now we're being told that it absolutely does, but then I've seen things to the contrary. I've actually seen, have you seen the reports indicating that back during the Spanish flu, a lot of people developed bacterial pneumonia?
Yes.
From wearing masks.
Yes.
So again,
we knew that.
It's weighing the risk, it's finding the information, but we're not being told in any one place, any one reliable place, this information. It's sad.
Well, I'll give you a great example because there is so much to unpack, and we've actually done a couple of episodes on COVID. We just did one on the COVID relief bill, which was really shocking when we started to dig into what was there. But here's a perfect example because this is one that everybody will remember. So there was a story that, Trump told people to inject themselves with bleach. And
oh my gosh.
I listened to the speech.
The whole thing.
I listened to the whole thing in context, and that is not at all what he said. He was referencing a trial that was actually happening from, I don't remember the company that was doing it, but he was referencing like maybe there's a way to, what was the word he used, disinfect from inside the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, every major news outlet is, Trump said that we should inject ourselves with bleach. And to this day, they're still saying that. And it's a complete and utter lie. I don't care if you are a Trump supporter or not a Trump supporter. It's a total lie. That is not what he said. And it's out there in the public square. You can go look it up. But yet so many people did not see that video. And these media outlets are getting away with a flat out lie. And there's no accountability.
Well, what is it?
And it drives me nuts.
We tell people
there
this
is no
all the time.
accountability. And
and
for
check
example,
and research.
I'm sorry?
We always tell people.
Darren's interrupting you because he's a jerk, but let me work on him for a minute. No,
Go ahead, Darren.
He was actually making a really good point. Please, Darren, continue.
Is we always tell people when we bring up a subject like that, we don't tell them this is what we feel or think or see out there or read. Go check the facts yourself.
Right. We always tell people, don't believe us, we're idiots.
Yeah, don't believe us, and don't check just the major news sources. Go find those ones that are out on the fringe. Go find the ones that are on the other side of the ocean, wherever else it might be, and use your brain and dig a little bit more before you go spouting off at the mouth. Exactly.
And I've got to say, part of the problem is, again, we're all so inundated that we don't know what's true. And sometimes, you know how it is. People will read just the headline and they'll like, oh, that's shocking. My friends need to know. I'll share this on Facebook right now.
Yes.
and then you come to find out that later that's not exactly true, or that the headline was misleading. Interestingly, what I would like to share is that the good news is there are, thankfully, some really good, in my opinion, independent reporters who are still doing what I would consider to be solid journalism. One of them is Cheryl Attkisson. Do you know who that is?
Yes, and I'm actually really excited to read her book.
I have it. And it's called Slanted is her latest book. And so Cheryl is not paying me for this ad, but
she should. I mean, come on.
But,
Send the
I'm
check
reading
to.
it right now, and it's interesting because, in many ways, but one of the things I just read today, I'm about in the middle of the book, but it talks about did you realize this? I did not realize this. The term fake news actually did not originate with Trump.
Yeah, I did know that, but I don't know where it originated.
Nixon.
Well, it originated with something, I'll have to look again at the book, but something connected to Google, and then Obama brought it up and talked about curating. I remember that word curating started to become popularly used to basically say that the general public can't figure out what the truth is, so we need to have the arbiters of truth, to use your terminology, out there. And so, but she said Trump actually, it used to apply to conservative news outlets. It was used against conservative news to say that was fake, but Trump used it better. So now it's used to refer to liberal news outlets. So
awesome.
He did it better, I think Cheryl said. And he just co-opted that term much more effectively than the other side was using. Yeah. So I thought that was very interesting. But so Cheryl does an amazing job. And what is actually breathtaking is she has compiled over 100. I don't remember how many there are, but I would strongly encourage anybody to go to her website and look up the lessons from the media mistakes in the Trump era. There are the laundry list is breathtaking of small things and big things. One of the small things that was absolutely false. Remember when they said that he removed the bust from MLK from I think it was the Oval Office?
Yes.
Yep.
And that was not true. They had to retract that.
Of course.
So she has a whole list of it's just flat out proven to be untrue. But yet it's interesting. Things will now be routinely labeled as baseless or without evidence or debunked. That's one of their favorite terms to be used now, without actual investigation. It gets labeled that way in the mainstream press.
Yeah, it's so here's a really great example of that recently is the election. There was a lot of irregularities, to say it nicely, with the election. And, as a conservative, I've said on the show before that, my political beliefs are conservative, and I'm fine with that. And if you think otherwise, I don't hate you. You're not a bad person, and you don't need to hate me either, because I'm a great person. I'm very good. Frankly, I'm a stable genius, Mr. Whitty.
Yes,
but I really struggle because we've gotten to this point where we're so divided, and it almost I'm going to back up totally with where I'm going with this train of thought. I'm frustrated because we're in this place where we're divided, right? And
yep.
we can't even start from a position of having a constructive conversation, because I don't know what happened with the election. I don't know if there was fraud or not. I have my opinions, but I don't know. And if there was, I don't know if that fraud is enough to have changed the outcome of the election. I really don't know. There's no way for me to know. And for anybody to sit there and say that I know that there was or I know that there wasn't, you're full of it. But what I did see was a lot of evidence that made me go, you know what? We probably should be looking into this big time because there are things that don't make sense. And we spent 2 years in taxpayer money trying to figure out if that happened when Trump got elected.
You know, I try not to put much anything that's sort of quasi-political or whatever on my own Facebook or whatever.
What, you don't like being abused?
You don't like being banned?
A couple of times I ventured
embrace
into that
the shadow ban.
I ventured in that world and I get slapped around just for raising the questions or pointing out facts. For example, coronavirus. I put a pie chart on my Facebook page and I said it showed how many deaths in the state of Ohio where I live were attributable to coronavirus versus all other causes. And at that time, I think that the slice of the pie chart occupied by the coronavirus was maybe, 3% or something very small. And I just said, context matters. I really feel that the public health officials missed a major opportunity to address all these other things that are preventable.
Sure.
And, getting people to exercise, to pay attention to their diet, reinforcing a lot of that, and which actually is also possibly preventative for coronavirus because there are strong correlations between obesity and bad outcomes with coronavirus. But I got attacked. I was called a science denier by some people for posting a pie chart and was defriended. Thank you. By some people for posting that. And the other day, I was decrying the fact that so many people were deplatformed by Twitter, not just President Trump, but 4.5 million people or so is the estimate I saw.
And there's going to be a lot more.
4.5 million people lost their Twitter accounts.
Mm-hmm.
That is what I saw. I don't know if that's a solid number, so that's a little bit of a disclaimer. But I said, I think my headline on it was something like, free speech is dying in America. And I said it was really troubling to me that these many people were kicked off of Twitter. And I had a link to an article that said Antifa was allowed to make violent threats and things like that. But then Trump was not allowed to make statements that were just interpreted that way. I had a former editor who worked with me 30 years ago say, shame on you, Janice, for posting that. Shame on me. I said, shame on me for what? For standing up for free speech. I'm actually proud of that. Do you know when I tried to tag him in that response?
What the hell's wrong with people?
His name wouldn't come up and I was defriended for just standing up for free speech. What in the heck is wrong with people? They have become extremists themselves.
That's why Parler is going to do so well now. Isn't that what it is? Parler?
If they can ever get it back online.
Parler's
and my definition of an extremist is partly this. Someone who is unwilling or unable to even consider that there's another viewpoint.
Yeah, I think
or
that's
a question.
It's absolutely crazy. Before we get
difficult,
there's a lot of stuff I want to get into. Like I want to get into the Parler thing, talk about Twitter. There's a couple of that's where this conversation's going, and the big takeaway for people, especially as it relates to their business. But I do want to go back to COVID for a minute because there's so much fuckery going on with. That's the only word I can come up with. Going on with COVID.
Shenanigans.
No, it's fuckery. It's not.
Tomfoolery?
No, it's not. It's definitely not either of those. I'll give you this. This is a great example. It's not just what people are saying, but it's what they're omitting. So this was 3 months ago, guys, when the CDC updated their report on COVID deaths, and they gave the actual deaths by COVID versus the comorbidities. Mm-hmm. You remember that? How long ago was it? That was about 3 months ago.
You and I were just talking about this last week or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago.
Well, Janice, I don't know that you remember this. Maybe you dug into it like me. I was like a conspiracy theorist foil hat in my basement, like digging into the details. But the CDC released a report when the death toll was about 190,000. And they broke out the deaths from COVID versus deaths with COVID.
Yes, I do remember that, but only vaguely. I just remember that report happened and that it was kind of shocking.
It should have been the biggest news story of the year, of the decade. Honestly, it should have been. And nobody talked about it. Not even what you would consider your conservative, outlets like Fox News and Newsmax. Like, they covered it for a second and then it was gone. And I literally think it was one of the biggest news stories of the century.
Where are they going to get their advertising dollars from?
Because here's the thing. This gave the detail of all these COVID deaths that have been, it was up to 190,000 at that point. And only 6,000 and change were from COVID, and they had all these other comorbidities. And there were things like, heart attack, heart disease as a comorbidity. It's like, okay, viruses don't cause heart disease and accelerate in 1 week from, my arteries are fine to, clogged and I've got a heart attack and I die. It doesn't do that. Furthermore, when you really dug deep, and this is still out there on the CDC's website, which is what blows my mind. Do you know what one of the comorbidities is, guys? Suicide. Suicide is a comorbidity, and so they were like, but we think we had COVID, so it's a death with COVID, and therefore it gets caught.
Oh, and the money comes along with it, right? Don't they get paid extra?
Oh my God, yes. So Janice, here's my point in this. I talked to so many people when that thing came out, and they're like, oh, that's bullshit. There's no fucking way that's true. It's like, hold on. I'd pull my phone out, go to the CDC's website. I had the page tagged. It's like, look at that. And I would show them on cdc.gov.
They still don't believe it.
No! I'm like, what the is wrong with you? It's right here on the government's website. No, I don't believe it.
So we're going to take Jake off his little soapbox here in a minute. But yeah, no, we brought that up. I know what we were talking about last week or the week before was cold and flu.
Yes.
And CDC and cold and flu. And they're like, it's all in the green right now when it should be in the red. But COVID.
There's no flu anymore. Yay.
So we cured it.
Cured the flu.
Yeah, guys.
Quick question.
Way to go.
For you. And this is getting off his topic. It's got to be the masks. But Janice, what? I mean,
miracle masks.
Sorry.
Is there anything like if you're reading news, are there any like key indicators that somebody you'd go, okay, this is a key indicator that I'm seeing. This has got to be fake, or not quite so much the truth. I mean, with your journalistic experience, are there anything out there that you're like, look, Pinocchio's telling another story?
Well, when I read any article that doesn't have an opposing viewpoint, I worry about it. Mm-hmm. I worry about what I'm not being told. That is the easy way to put it. If for example, what happened last week at the Capitol is to me a really good example. Some people looked at Trump's speech and they felt like parts of it sounded like he was inciting violence. And those parts were quoted widely. But yet...
You mean the part where he said patriotic Americans?
That's the part I'm about to get to. But yeah, those news reports it was rare to see news reports make reference to, here's how I would cover Trump's speech if I had been assigned. I would have said, here is what President Donald Trump said prior to this thing that happened at the Capitol. And some people looked at this part of the speech and they cited these passages as examples of things that they think may have ignited the violence. However, there were these other parts of the speech that people said, look, he said patriotically and peacefully, we will march to the Capitol, something to that effect. But the word peacefully and patriotically, that phrase was in there. But you don't see that. It doesn't fit the quote unquote narrative that he incited the violence. And now we're coming out with them. They've done some very good work on the timelines, very detailed timelines that are coming out.
From sources that you wouldn't suspect.
Where is the balance? Where is the person saying, hey, I didn't see his speech that way? Or, other people say, yes, I see the speech that way. But no, you don't have that other side where people interpreted it differently. And I have a problem with that.
John,
well, it's not just the speech.
John had a question there.
No, I was just saying that with the timelines, from sources you wouldn't suspect, like, the New York Times and the Washington Post.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's not just Trump's speech. It's the whole narrative of storming the Capitol building. Like, I've seen video where the Capitol Police are like, come on in. You know,
and people are strolling through the hallways. They're not running like madmen.
But not only that, the timelines put people breaking into the Capitol
before the speech.
30 minutes before he's finished, or 20 minutes before he's even finished the speech.
Yeah.
And it's a 40
longer before that. Yeah, I've seen several different timelines. So,
right.
You know, again, see, the other part that happened there, in my opinion, that was really bad journalism is they just assumed that it was Trump supporters. They didn't realize that. Personally, here's what I think happened. I do think that there were outside agitators who ginned up certain extremists. And there were some maybe actual Trump supporters who got sucked into it. But for a lot of the people there that were causing the problems and destroying property, those people were actually wearing Trump gear like a costume. I mean,
sure, of course. Listen, there is undoubtedly.
No, there's already been one charged.
Yes, exactly.
No, but
I know who it is.
Here's
John
my point.
Sullivan is his name. Yeah.
Undoubtedly, there were Trump supporters in that group doing stupid shit. And undoubtedly, there were Antifa members, left-wing radicals, doing the same
antagonizing.
thing. And they were both, as Janice said early in the conversation, fringe, crazies, idiots. Okay? But let's go back. Throughout the year, there's been riots, there's been confrontation and violence. And I ask you a question, and I ask everybody listening, be honest with yourself. You're on social media. Are you surprised? I mean, seriously.
No.
Look at the level of dialogue in vitriol and hate. Are you surprised? You shouldn't be. It's coming from every direction.
But you know what's so sad, too, is what people have come to expect in terms of reporting. A local reporter here in the Cincinnati area posted on her Facebook page that her assignment was to find people who attended the event in Washington, D.C. and hear their stories. And a lot of those people just said, hey, I didn't even know there was any violence where I was. I didn't see anything like that. And she was receiving horrible message from people criticizing her for telling that part of the story, which wasn't being told at all. So you have like hundreds of thousands of people there. And certainly some of those people have a different story to tell than the very visual, horrible images of terrible things going on inside the Capitol. But yet it doesn't fit what you want to think.
Of course.
So
we had that happen here last summer when people were marching. Atlanta was one thing. But then down in our area, south of Atlanta, they had a march, very peaceful. People walked. They did I think they got too tired before they got to the end is why, and it was hot. But, it was a peaceful march. There were no instigator. The nice thing was there weren't those fringe agitators there to cause a scene, and they did it correctly within their constitutional rights.
Antifa was still hiring. They hadn't. they didn't have enough staff yet.
There were a few counties away where they needed them.
Okay,
but
so
seriously, what is wrong with people that they can't allow a news reporter to do her job, which is to get that other part of the story, and that I can't be allowed to put on Facebook that I'm worried about free speech dying?
Right.
Well,
I'm being told I should be ashamed of that. What? This is some kind of bizarro world with like alternate reality. I don't understand it. I really don't.
Well, giving somebody two different types of voting ballots if they went to the box so they could. Oh, never mind. Forget it.
Yeah, that would never happen. So, Janice, this is kind of bringing me to where I wanted to take this conversation today. So, you can't trust the news, which I think if you...
That's a blanket statement.
You can trust the news. You just have to...
do your due diligence.
Due diligence. And Janice has even said that.
Eternal vigilance is the price of freedom, right?
What the hell are you guys...
Thank you.
Are you guys high?
Thank you. No, we're trying to speak from a
because we're just saying there's good journalists.
We're grounded.
That's a fair statement. So
just don't believe anything that comes out.
I don't stand corrected.
Got to pull in those reins.
I will give them a
There's
point.
There's a difference. If I say something,
it's full of shit.
Full of shit. If Mr. Winnie says something, there's probably truth behind it. So there's a difference. Go check your sources.
When you asked whether we were high, though, I think the correct answer to that is Dave's not here, man. Remember that?
Dave's not here, man.
Oh, yeah. That was awesome.
Okay, so fair point, guys. There's some fair journalists out there. But I think in aggregate, we've reached this point where it's why we say all the time, Darren, on the show, don't believe us. Go do your homework, because we're trying to foster critical thinking, which the media doesn't want you to do, okay? And that's a problem. And then you layer on top of that now the power of social media, because a lot of people have supplemented or supplanted, I guess is the better word, their source of information from the media to social media, which is no better. And so this is where I wanted to get to as it relates to business.
Okay.
So within the last week and a half, if you have not been following, there's been this saga on Parler, which actually Mr. Winnie told me about because I've been trying to disconnect so much. He's like, have you seen what's going on with Parler? I'm like, no, I'm living in ignorant bliss. What's going on? And then, of course, I got up to speed.
I don't even know what Parler was until he told me.
Right.
And then
so for
the same thing.
Mr. Winnie, give our listeners the quick 30,000-foot view of Parler and what's happened.
Parler is the alternative to Twitter, really.
And or Facebook.
It's not really...
Ish.
I don't know. They got shut down before.
They're both steaming piles of social.
Right, but Parler's problem was it didn't edit.
They let
they didn't.
But go further back. So they were this alternative, right?
Sure.
What was the difference between Parler and Twitter/Facebook
and Reddit?
I just told you.
What?
I didn't.
There's no editing.
Yeah, it was actually free speech.
That's what I'm
They
going
let
for.
everybody voice their opinions, and they didn't close any accounts unless it violated their terms and conditions.
Except mine.
Right. So they did have T's and C's.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So what happened is it started with Apple, right? So take us through the chronology of events.
Well, I don't know the exact chronology. You're putting me on the spot here.
No. We'll fact check you afterwards.
There were some posts. There were some posts on Parler that threatened the lives of, I think, the vice president and other certain members of the House or Senate.
Yep.
Extreme.
And so, I believe it started with Apple, and they weren't taken down quickly enough, I guess. They were taken down.
They were taken down.
But Apple said, nope. We're
Not fast enough.
Yeah, we're going to take you off our app store.
So if you have an iPhone, now you can no longer download the app.
Yes.
Really?
And then that carried on to Google, took them off the Google Play Store. And then Amazon Web Services, who runs their servers, said, we're just going to turn you off at midnight tonight.
Wow. And that was last week.
And this is, I don't know what their market cap was, but it was a
big
company.
Well-funded.
So big, you and I never even heard of it.
Tens of millions of users and growing rapidly.
Holy cow.
Yeah, and just shut off with a flip of the switch.
Well, Reddit's got to be happy.
And then the
Ayatollah Khomeini or whoever has these Twitter accounts where they've,
And there was one of the founding investors on Parler was on the radio, and he came out but you won't hear this in the media, that those exact same posts were found on Twitter and on Facebook.
Really?
Yes.
And they let them go. They were okay. They didn't shut them down for that.
Right.
But Parler.
But all three platforms removed the posts.
Correct.
And the whole thing was, it's like, oh, well, but they didn't like the response from Parler. It's like, but they took it down. And furthermore...
Well, and also the media, they took one image from some obscure neo-Nazi dude on Parler or whatever and, had picture of a flag with a swastika or whatever and say, this is why we're taking Parler down.
And I'm sure you'd never find something like that on Facebook, ever.
Right.
Ever. I mean, give me a break. So this scares the shit out of me because with a just snap of a finger, this company has essentially been shut down, Janice.
Yeah.
And it's unclear whether or not they'll be able to open, because what happened is the power of these big tech companies is so scary that now the other companies that could host their website don't want to touch Parler, because they're like, well, I've got ties to Apple and Google and Amazon, and I don't want to be shut down.
Political affiliations right behind it. Big lobbyists behind those two. Right there, not Parler.
That really freaked me out about Amazon Web Services. Like they could just shut somebody off.
Just that.
And this is really going down the rabbit hole here, but who else is a customer of Amazon Web Services? They're like one of the largest, if not the largest, right?
AWS, they are the largest.
How about
they're the
Department
largest
of
for
Defense?
Data services.
Department of Defense, CIA.
That's where they
do all
make
their cloud computing, all their storage.
It's all out there.
That's spooky, man.
It really is.
What if Amazon gets mad at the government one time and just says, "Yeah, we're just going to shut it down"?
Oh, but we've still got all the data. It's ours.
Why would we set up our own data centers
It's
internally with
totally bizarre,
especially with highly classified information? Why wouldn't we keep that contained? We'll just let AWS handle it for us.
But Janice, all of this was started with.
It's like, oh, this is getting crazy.
Well, the thing is, if you actually, it's kind of like going to Vegas. They tell you when you play slot machines, if you do it with a certain combination, you'll hit the jackpot. So if you order certain products on Amazon.
But the guy
Amazon,
that tell you that, was he wearing a $50,000 Rolex?
No, but listen, I was watching Ocean's 12 or Ocean's 13.
So it's got to be true.
But they used to actually have that. But I'm like, if you order a certain combination of products on Amazon, then you get the backdoor key into AWS. It's classified. Never mind. Forget it.
Anyway,
it's a bad joke. Sorry,
so
Janice.
Getting back to the point here. Sorry, we've really went down the rabbit hole. The whole thing was predicated on a narrative, a false narrative about Parler. But in the snap of a finger, within 48 hours, a company went from controversial to shut down, and it is unclear if they're going to reopen. Wow. Millions and millions of dollars have been invested, tens of millions of customers using their platform, loving and enjoying it, and then bang, it's gone.
Yeah. That's absolutely chilling. And I don't care if people hate what Parler stood for or allowed or whatever. It's not right to squelch free speech. Even hate speech has been upheld as being okay in this country. We live in a country where free speech is one of the bedrocks of our society. And it just really is chilling, because I've seen this out there, and maybe people think this is an extreme viewpoint, but I think these are the seeds of what could lead to a totalitarian, you must think this way, Orwellian or totalitarian regime.
Scary.
Well,
if you don't think this way, if you don't act this way, if you say something bad against masks or coronavirus vaccine or whatever, look at how many anti-coronavirus vaccine posts have been removed just because someone says, I am afraid of this.
Yes, it's crazy. And I mean, a lot of those people are doctors. Mm-hmm. It's like,
are they not allowed to be afraid? I don't care if they're a doctor or not. Aren't you allowed to say, I'm afraid of this, and have a discussion with, maybe people will come out with information that will change their mind? Hey, yeah?
Yeah, they pull it down too fast. It's like that article that you were telling me about down in Florida about that lab.
Oh, yeah.
100% positive COVID tests.
Yep.
And you couldn't find it anywhere after like the first day that it was put out to the news.
I think it was Fox 5 Orlando that broke the story.
I saw that, yeah.
And it should have been national news. Never made it to that point.
Yep.
It's crazy. Yep. But going back to this whole Parler thing, the reason
Dave went.
What's that?
And we know where Dave went. Dave's not here. Dave was the one in charge of that lab.
Not you, man.
Yeah. Going back to this whole Parler thing, the reason why this is so chilling, Janice, is because the whole thing's predicated on a narrative that's not true. Nothing really separated Parler from Twitter and Facebook because they all had these posts. They all removed them. But the difference is that the tech overlords didn't like the...
Parler was conservative, heavy.
Call it the value proposition of Parler, right? And they're a legitimate threat to Twitter and to Facebook because so many people, and they know it because they're seeing people post on their own platforms how disenchanted they are with the platform. Mm-hmm. So they know alternatives are a threat. They know that. And yet they were able to so easily and so no
recourse. Right.
Cavalierly?
Non-controversial.
Yeah, that's a way to
cavalierly. And it was non-controversial for them to remove a company, erase it.
Just boom.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That is.
Well, I don't know if I agree that it was non-controversial because I think that there are a lot of people who, I saw something somewhere that talked about how many billions of dollars that Twitter has lost now. And I think some of it is of their own doing from the standpoint that they zapped people from their platform, but other people have left in protest and they've gone to these other fledgling services such as Telegram and Signal, I think, are a couple.
Signal I've heard of just the other day. My mom sends me a thing. Get the Signal app. I'm like, what the hell are you talking?
You know Signal, but you'd never heard of Parler.
I don't know what Signal is until my mother sent me a text with it.
Darren lives under a rock at Line Creek Brewery.
I mean, I gotta go home and feed my pigeons. So my homing pigeon. I have a totally different question for you.
Yeah.
But you were a crime reporter.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about suppressing information, and I'm sure you followed a lot of stories that you reported on all the way through the court system when they went to trial and everything else. How infuriating was it when you knew that some key facts were suppressed from the jurors in that court case that could have overturned that case and made it go the opposite way?
This could be a whole separate conversation.
Okay. Well, we won't have it as a whole. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build a comparison where you saw this in the court system and we're seeing it in the news.
It really caused me to feel, I understand there has to be some rules. Like, for example, in rape cases, they used to bring up, the woman's history of hanging out with men, blah, 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 and make it look like that, she brought this situation on herself, right?
Like Jodie Foster in that movie.
And I understand that type of evidence probably should not be allowed, but
shame on her. She was beautiful.
There you go.
Showing too much skin.
But so I get that there needs to be some rules, but what I call the legal gamesmanship,
right,
where they lose sight of trying to find the truth, that really, really is disturbing. And it really ends up being, unfortunately, a lot of times that information that would help the jury, in my view, it does end up being suppressed. And it when I saw that happen in a couple of different cases, including the one that I wrote a book about, it kind of just shattered my view of what I thought the justice system should be in this country. And I found out that it doesn't always work the way people think. I do still think that most times that the right result happens. I want to believe that. But when it goes sideways, it's hard to correct it.
Well, let's go back to the whole Parler thing, because this is really important. And this is where I wanted people to understand the linkage between what's going on with news media, social media, and your business. Because Parler got shut down. But let's take this down to a smaller level. Okay?
Good beer.
I'm doing
good beer.
I'm saying wordly things. Yes, it's very good beer. It's got me tongue twisted.
Wordlies.
Let's take this down to a smaller level, right? Beer and business. Right now, as we speak, something is going on in our social media. We are not in anybody's feeds. I've checked with so many people.
One social media site.
Yeah, and we'll name we won't name any names or faces. And we
were also told that part of it was because we used a certain 5-letter phrase.
Whatever the hell it is. My point is,
why the post didn't go. That's why.
Here's where I'm going with this, Janice. We're not showing up in feeds. I think unless you search directly for us, you're not going to find us. Mm-hmm. And that is by design, because we've talked about some things that the tech overlords and the algorithms don't like.
Yeah, but we're back on YouTube. They love us again.
No, they do not love us, Darren. Nobody fucking watches us. Why is that? We're not getting recommended.
We're still searchable. We're easily searchable on YouTube.
We are easily searchable on YouTube. We're not shadow banned
any longer on YouTube.
But
thank you, YouTube. We love you.
Yeah, we love you so much.
Because we're a podcast, and why would you watch a video?
You. And for the longest time, Janice, you couldn't even find Beer and Business if you search for us on YouTube.
Yeah.
But we've spoken truth, and it's impacted us. Here's why I'm bringing this up. You look at what's happened with Parler, and you look at what's happened with all these other Twitter accounts getting canceled. I probably imagine that most of those people lean the same direction politically. You're next. You, the listener, you're next. They're coming for you because the whole point here is to shut down dialogue. The more one-sided you make it, the more isolated that you make somebody, the more crazy they become. And, oh, geez, look at these crazy people over here. Shut their voices down. That's where this is going.
Well, there's a terrific quote that's on point that I don't remember it verbatim at all, but it was from the Nazi Germany era, and it goes something like this. First, they came for the communists, but I didn't speak up because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists. I didn't speak up because I was not a socialist. And then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one to speak for me.
That is Niels Nollerman, and I just read it for the first time last night, helping my daughter with her English class.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful, powerful, sad quote.
Yeah.
Yep. So they stood there. There's another story that they compared it, another poem by Walt Whitman that really talks about the same thing.
It's just
yes.
the insanity of the mob, the insanity of the level of disinformation. You know what it reminds me of? The video that went viral of the guys sitting there playing beer pong, and the Antifa mob goes past them, and they're like, "Yeah, guys, you rock!" And then they threw the bricks through the window, and they're yelling out, "We're on your side! We're on your side!" It's like it doesn't matter at that point. Everybody, and if you're looking at what's going on, and you're like, "Well, I'm okay because I agree with," if you're a liberal and you're like, "Well, that's fine. It's going in my direction. I'm okay with that." Eventually, it's going to catch up because.
Okay. So let me ask you this. If you're trying to point out what's wrong or what's that you're noticing, people are noticing that's wrong, and you're trying to do it across the interwebs through social media and such, and you're being totally shut down, then what is the only other way? What other ways can you have your voice heard?
Let me stop you there. Before we go to that, this is the point that I want to make, Janice, and this is why it's so important. We've done episodes on COVID. We've done an episode on the cancel culture. We've done an episode on, the CARES Act, the HEROES Act. I mean, we've done all this stuff to talk about the insanity of the world right now. All it takes is one mistake. And we've gotten to this point where as a culture, you make one mistake, you make one post, and somebody's like, Darren's a misogynist. And all of a sudden it catches fire, and Darren gets, all of a sudden all kinds of people locally are like, well, I'm not going to Launch and Go, and there's like some sort of public outcry. And then, Facebook sees it and says, you know what? Launch and Go doesn't need to have an account. And Twitter says, oh, well, Facebook did it, I'm in too. And then Amazon says, well, his website's with us, you're done. And all of a sudden, he's toxic. And, I mean, he really is, because I have to sit next to him when we podcast. Right. But that's what I'm saying. The whole crazy thing about this is it does not matter what side you're on. One mistake, one thing taken out of context, and you're done. And that is a scary place. What's that?
You become a pariah.
Yes. And I'm shocked that we've got to this place so fast. It started with clickbait.
It's an amazing studio.
Technology.
That's why you used to be on the farm, in the garage, in the closet.
But
and you came here.
It started with clickbait in the 2000s. And in this very fast evolution. Here we are.
They've been suppressing your voices for decades. I mean, it's been going on forever and ever and ever. It's just changed its platform.
I venture to say that the three of us have made remarks during this very podcast that would be on the unapproved list.
Oh, Mr. Winnie, you've been like making all nice comments then.
Me?
Well, she said the three of us.
There's actually four of us, Janice.
4 of us.
Oh, 4 of us.
Yeah.
Yes, but that's okay. We're drinking beer, so.
Well, like 3.5. Darren really doesn't.
Well, you know what I was saying.
Yeah.
All of us.
I'm not full size. I'm half size.
Two that would lead to deplatforming you possibly. Really?
Yeah. If the right people were upset or got triggered.
Sure.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's. This is one of those episodes where I don't really know that we've got takeaways. I don't know what to do about it, honestly, other than to raise awareness, because I think it's like you got
to be careful with your business. Unfortunately, as you said, you want to roll this back around to business. We're talking about fake news. If you have a business, don't have your business being the one. Be careful of what your business's tone and voice is going to be out in the public, because you could just kill your business.
Yeah, and if you want more context on that, go back and listen to our episode on virtue signaling.
Yeah,
because that was a good one. But I think the biggest thing that I think every problem solving is like a crawl, walk, run strategy. And I think the crawl portion, the where to start, is that most people don't acknowledge how bad things really are. I think so many people don't want to acknowledge or accept the fact that we're really being lied to. Like, no, it can't be. It's like my friends, I'm showing them the CDC website. No, that's bullshit. It's a government website. I'm showing you data right off here. Right. Why? We've got to start with the acceptance. And this should be bipartisan, Mr. Whitty. Everybody should be on board for this. Everybody.
Right. But we've devolved to, what is human nature, right? To take the path of least resistance. We like things that we like. If we have if there are no more honest news sources, that tell both sides of the story, they tell the difficult side and the easy side. We're going to go to a news source that tells us the easy side. And it's only going to, in my personal opinion, it's only going to get worse from here. I don't see.
Thanks for the uplifting message.
No problem. It's just human nature, man. I mean,
yeah,
it's.
I actually feel like that one of the things that should be done within the journalism profession is one of the problems that I think could be fixed fairly easily would be to more clearly label an opinion show as an opinion show. It needs to say opinion or something like that right on the screen, the whole show, because people will take somebody like Sean Hannity. He is not a reporter. He is a commentator, and there is a difference. And people will say, well, Fox News has unfair coverage of things. He is not a reporter. Yeah. And at the same time, the news side of these organizations, the news coverage, needs to make sure that their news reports include exploring different sides of the story and not just the side that makes their organization brand, so to speak. For example, I like to use this example a lot just to give people, here's how a news story should be covered. Say I have a cell phone and it's got a white cover and here are the dimensions of it. I've measured it. I can describe that as a journalist, okay? But I should not presuppose that this is a beautiful, wonderful cell phone. What I need to do is get someone's opinion about the cell phone after I describe the attributes of the phone. And then I get somebody that says, hey, this is a great phone. It's beautiful. It's functional, blah, blah, blah. Somebody else over here says, oh, it looks too girly for me. I'd never use that phone. And I don't like the functions because of this. So my point is a reporter should never couch his or her questions by saying, Now tell me the reasons this phone is wonderful, or this is such a wonderful phone because they've already presupposed that the phone's wonderful. And that is not the role of the journalist. That's the role of the commentator. And the journalist's role is to describe facts and then to allow other people to give their opinions about the facts. That's it.
Right. So let me give you my opinion on this, okay? I think you're right. But this to me is a lot like term limits. It's the fox watching the hen house. It's never going to happen. Because the only way that the news media would do that, Janice, in my opinion, is if it was legislated. But it's not going to be legislated. Just like
term limits. Because of the way our society is set up, Congress shall make no law.
Right. So I think if you're listening to this wondering, well, what can I do? Well, tune it out. Turn it off. Don't give them the ad revenue. We can vote with our feet. We still have that power because without eyeballs, these business models don't exist. So we can still hold them accountable. Because if there are sources out there that give you balanced news and you can go seek those out, then put your eyeballs there and take them off the places that aren't giving you that balanced story. I really feel like that's the only thing we can do. And that plus critical thinking.
Oh.
Critical thinking. No, that goes back to what I said, that people are they're gonna watch stuff that they agree with.
But this audience is really good. They're smarter than the average bear.
Right.
Or maybe they're dumber because they're still listening to us. I don't know, but they're not right.
Darren brings those.
Yes.
Those in.
If you listen to this podcast, we consider you smart. Not because of us, but because of the people we bring on the show.
Yes.
Don't subscribe to that theory and do everything you can to try to, convince people otherwise. Don't get out of your echo chamber. It's comfy in there. It's warm. It's like the embrace of that old blankie.
It's like a snuggie.
It is like a snuggie. You don't need a snuggie. You should be uncomfortable with news. News should be a little jarring. It should be uncomfortable. It should be like, oh, shit, really? And that's when you know you're getting news. And then, apply that. You've been given this wonderful asset between your ears, except for Darren. I mean, there's
we love you, buddy.
in every rule.
Aww. Look at him over there. He's so cute.
Thank God he's cute, because otherwise it's just there.
Freaking Ewok over here. They're adorable. It was a horrible movie, but they're still cute.
Use the gray matter between your ears. It's there for a reason. You don't have to believe everything you hear.
Yep.
All right. Awkward silence. Awkward pause.
But part of the problem is that people have shut themselves off to other viewpoints. I don't know how you fix that. Like, for example, a meme that I saw floating around basically said, you think you're doing enough by communicating, but you're really not, because comprehension is actually what is needed, not just communication.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And there cannot be comprehension unless there's an open-minded approach to it. And I think that people have literally closed themselves off to anything other than what they already think. And I don't know how to fix that.
I've said that. I think we even said that before, that up at Capitol Hill, until they reach across the aisle and extend that olive branch.
It's way before that. I mean, Janice kind of explained it to us when she was a Cub reporter, and she told us about the interactions she had with her editor.
Yeah,
was it? You're an impressionable person when you're young, and you need mentors. Pick a good mentor. Somebody who's honest, and teachers.
Right. That's scary.
Find a good teacher. It's our education system teaching rational thought.
Rational thought? Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yep. Well, they go to their peers is what it is, because all their peers believe what they believe. So let me stay within that, as you said, in that
But this is all a reflection of a larger societal change that's been happening.
It needs to happen, otherwise we're going down the shitter fast.
Well, there you go.
For real.
Well,
John, you make a great point.
Kind of a bigger point, I would just like to go back to, what about the good old golden rule? Think about, would you like to have your opinion disrespected? I think that might be part of the solution, is to get back to that very, very basic Think about how disrespectful people are if you just raise a question sometimes. Wow.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. The golden rule.
Yeah.
100%.
And I think if you respect other people and other people's opinion and you get into a debate, an honest discussion, which we have prided ourselves on in this podcast, we always seek the truth. We're willing to listen. We're willing to have honest, dialogue in intellectually honest. If you're willing to do that, you're going to find that there's more compromise in life than you ever realized. But we're starting from this baseline where it's not there. So, the biggest thing that I want people to take away from this discussion is the fact that you should be questioning what you hear. You should be critically thinking. And, we don't know what the answers are, but the direction that we're going is not good, and more people should be aware. And you should at least, if anything, know that, yes, it is possible that the media, the government, people in power, very powerful tech companies can lie to you. And they are. And that's not good. Not. And I don't care what you believe, what your political affiliation is, you should never, ever want that.
They're not lying. They're just not telling you the whole truth.
Or any part of the truth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lie is such a strong word.
Yeah. So Janice, on a lighter note, you have written a book. Tell us about your book. Well, you've written two, but there's your most recent book. Tell us about.
Well, actually, the book isn't really a lighter note necessarily, but in a way it does fit with this discussion. The main book that I wrote that I was very, very passionate about was a case I covered as a news reporter, and it's called Submerged. Ryan Widmer, His Drowned Bride in the Justice System. And what I tried to do with this book is to describe the evidence that was in this bathtub drowning case that some people interpreted as suspicious, but other people could look at the same evidence and think that it was not suspicious. For example, 911 call. The guy sounds too upset or doesn't sound upset enough, like that. So that was one of the cases that really opened my eyes to the justice system, because I will tell you, you would think after a guy goes on trial, not once, not twice, but 3 times, that everything would be on the table, wouldn't you?
Cow.
You would.
3 times?
Yeah. But I found things that were never presented during his trials, and I brought them out in my book.
Wow.
And I always found it kind of a little annoying, but I guess maybe I should expect it's human nature for someone to go, well, what does she think? Did he do it or didn't he do it? I don't come to a conclusion. I encourage the reader to come to his or her own conclusion about whether this particular guy really committed the crime that he was convicted of or not. And it's been a case that's been on Dateline NBC, very much debated, and it actually happened back in 2008. So it's been a while. And I just would encourage people to look at that case. It actually fits with what we've been discussing, because you can look at the evidence as suspicious or not suspicious for almost every piece of evidence that is in the case. And I would like to challenge people in this way. I think this is a good way to wrap this up. Challenge people to, if you realize that you have reached a conclusion about something in a very quick fashion without looking at everything, look for opportunities to prove yourself wrong.
Ooh. Don't
just look for opportunities to go, yay, I'm right. Think really about good. What is the other side? What am I missing? What could I be wrong? How often do we really ask ourselves that? Because I ask myself that many times throughout the coverage of that particular case.
I just accept it every morning I wake up.
You probably should, Darren.
So what's the name of the book?
It's called Submerged, Ryan Widmer, His Drowned Bride, and the Justice System.
And where can people find it to buy it?
On evil Amazon.
On the really good Amazon.
Bitches.
Or on my website, which they can find it by going to thesubmergedbook.com.
Okay.
We'd prefer that one. So go to www.thesubmergedbook.com. And I love what you said, Janice, and I'm actually really interested in reading this book, and I'm definitely going to. I love that you said that read it and come to your own conclusion. isn't that what we've been saying the entire freaking discussion?
And then also
think for
admit that
yourself.
sometimes you might be incorrect with your thoughts.
Right.
Huh.
And I also think that same frame of mind, entrepreneurs are very good at this with their own business. Like, what can I do better? What am
Self-deprecation.
Well, that's you, Darren, because you give yourself such a, incredible canvas.
Yes.
That's Darren. But, we're so good in business of saying, what could I do better? What did I do wrong? But we're not really good at that when it comes to opinions about politics and religion and, wedge issues. And we should be. There's no difference. Because guess what? Mr. Winnie, you're not always right.
I would never wear a wedge. They don't go with my jeans.
You were wrong once.
Always, no.
There was one time, Mr. Winnie.
Yeah, but that was so long ago.
But he did it just to see what it felt like.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yes. But, man, this has been really interesting, Janice, and I hope that we have challenged our listeners to really think. And I know that this has been a lot of fun for me to dissect this because I'm not happy with where we're at, and I'm not happy with where we're going, and I kind of struggle day to day trying to figure out what can I do to make this better. And I think most people listening have really related to that feeling, regardless of how you feel about politics and whatever. Kind of feels like it's out of control, and maybe we can take a little bit of control back.
So this podcast was kind of our way collectively to make things a little better in the world, which was, as I said, my whole reason for going into journalism.
Yes, and honestly, it was our mission when we started this podcast too, is, how can we help people out, is insignificant or significant as it could be. And I'm telling you what, I get just as much, maybe actually let me back up. I think I get more value out of hearing that one story where somebody's like, man, I heard something on this one episode and it really changed things for me. That means more to me than knowing that, 50,000 people listen to an episode. Like, that doesn't mean as much to me as that one person that's like, I made a change because of something I heard.
I'm really glad that Janice is on the program because, being on the Beer and Business podcast, you just started out 2021 on a high note. Mm-hmm. You've set the bar really high for yourself.
It's all downhill from here.
So,
this is
I might as well just stop while I'm ahead.
Being on this podcast, it increases your marketability in the job market. It increases your sex appeal. Pretty much everything's better after this. So you're welcome.
Rock and roll.
Well, Janice, we really appreciate you coming on, man. This has been a lot of fun. We drank some delicious beers from Line Creek Brewing. We drank Cloud to Ground IPA, which was awesome. And then we drank this delicious dark lager Renegade, which we've had a few times in the past. And, man, it's been awesome. So make sure you're supporting Line Creek Brewing, Peachtree City, Georgia. Buy their beer or I'll come strangle you. Just pretty much throwing it out there. No. Just buy the beer, please. All right. Thank you. Folks, we really appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you next week.
See ya.